Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you are not new here, then this will be a new filming location for you. I'm actually coming to you live from my guest room. I just have just a little daybed in this room, not a whole lot else, but I thought it would be nice and cozy for today's style layering video. As you may know, one of my absolute favorite video topics to make on my channel is actually where I take your favorite styles and show you how to layer them together in your space. I have 4 brand new styles straight from the comments that I'm going to be deep diving through today. So if you enjoy these videos, let me know down in the comments. And as we go through, if you can think of some of your favorite styles or some of the style combos you really want to see, definitely drop them in the comments down below as well. I'm really excited, so let's get started. Okay, so our first 2 styles we're having a look at is British Colonial and Modern Organic. And I will be honest, I do have some notes next to me here. I just have my iPad, so if you see me glancing over to the side, that's what I'm referring to over here. But basically, I have always loved British Colonial style. I didn't actually know the term for it exactly, so before this, I did do a deep dive on Pinterest, and this is definitely one of my favorite styles out there. I'm always just a huge fan of a very traditional or collected style. This one in particular is very curated. I feel like if you want to do this authentically in your home, you have to be decorating with actual vintage or antique pieces. Now, obviously, I am somebody who just loves the historical style, but the fun thing about British Colonial is I do think it just has a little bit more of a fresh take. Generally speaking, I feel like there's more tropical elements or maybe some Caribbean elements. So overall, it does have just a little bit more of a twist than your very traditional English style would be. And on the flip side, Modern Organic is obviously a very contemporary style. This is something we've really seen emerge in recent years. So it's a lot more cleaner lines. It's going to be just a little bit more simplistic and minimalistic. What I love about mixing these 2 styles together is just how well they balance each other out. With British Colonial, I do feel like a room can feel very full and there's just so much going on. So mixing in some of those more modern organic elements is just going to help pare back the space. And while Modern Organic can feel very warm and welcoming, I do sometimes think it does come across as slightly boring. So mixing in some of these artifacts and character-filled pieces, this is just going to add so much more interest to the space. And I do think there are some points where these 2 styles intersect. It's definitely going to be through materials and textures. Obviously, with both styles, wood tones are going to be key. This is really going to pair nicely with some of the more historical elements, and it's still going to give that warm, natural texture that we look for in an organic style. When you're actually selecting different furniture pieces in this pairing, I do think it would be nice to kind of flip between the 2 styles evenly when it comes to some of the larger items. For instance, I do think just a very simple modern organic sofa or bed would be a really nice piece to bring into the room. This is going to simplify some of the lines and just give it a little bit more of a low profile. And then from there, when you're layering in some of the smaller accents, this is where you could really be adding that charm with the British colonialism. And then on the other hand, if you are incorporating some genuine antique furniture pieces, these would be really fun to decorate with other more organic potted plants or something that's a little bit more sculptural or modern. It doesn't always have to feel like every single element in there is antique or it is a historical artifact. And I do think a nice area to layer these 2 styles is actually going to be through artwork. Again, with some of these more maximalist historic styles, sometimes the artwork can just feel like the exact same thing over and over again. And the same thing for Modern Organic. Typically, the art kind of lacks character, it lacks personality. So when you're mixing this artwork, it is nice to nod to some of those more classical painting techniques while still keeping it fresh and vibrant with something that's just a little bit more abstract. And I do love a home that feels like it's really been collected over time, and I think that this style pairing is going to do just that, especially if you actually want to just go to the store and buy something that's brand new. That's where you could be infusing some of that modern organic taste, and then you're really just adding that punch of character with smaller items and smaller elements that you you really can take your time and curate. And I should point out that I actually received 2 comments regarding British colonialism. The first was obviously to do with modern organic, which I've shared with you here, but the second comment was just a query in general of how you can pair this style with others. And I will say, because a British colonial already embodies some of these more natural elements, it's just my opinion, but I do think it pairs best with other organic styles. I would avoid trying to pair this with very retro spaces or anything else that's very maximalist. This is when the space can start to feel very overloaded, and you're probably going to start to overlook some of those great classical elements that this style is known for. And overall, sometimes British colonial can feel just a little bit rigid, so I do love pairing it with organic lines because it's just helping to loosen up the space a little bit, and it's going to help this style flow a little bit better naturally throughout your home. I actually get so many comments from people saying they love Japanese Zen, but they have a really hard time pairing it with other styles in their home and mixing in their personality when it comes to this style. And I totally get it, because Japanese Zen just provides such a calm and serene feeling in your home, which most of us are trying to achieve. And because the style is just so simple and minimalistic, it definitely can be challenging when it comes to adding character and personality in the space, but do not fret, because I do believe it can be done. Again, I did receive a few comments when it came to style pairings with Japanese Zen, but I think I'm just going to combine them all into one category of just eclectic style. This term really just encapsulates many different styles, and it's still going to give you just a broad view of how you can incorporate different styles with Japanese Zen. Eclectic interiors have lots of life and vibrancy and a ton of personality, but sometimes they can go just over the top in incorporating too many styles or having a little bit too much going on. So when you bring in that Zen influence, again, this is just going to help pare down the style. I find when I'm mixing most styles, my favorite pairings are always going to be with a maximalist style and a minimalist style. It just works so well to balance 2 different sides of the spectrum. And I think sometimes what can be challenging with Japanese Zen is there's just so many natural elements going on that it can feel just a little bit bland. So by mixing in more of that eclectic take, it's nice to layer different materials and different design elements that you wouldn't normally find within a Zen space. And even if you were thinking of heavily leaning into the Zen style, I do think there's a nice eclectic take of just introducing very unique shapes and lines, and you're not keeping it so minimalistic in nature. This is really going to add a little bit of character, even if you are keeping it very calm and serene. And I do think artwork is a nice way of achieving this. Obviously, if the rest of your larger furniture pieces are leaning a little bit more Zen forward, when your walls are feeling very stark and blank, this is just a great area to add a subtle pop of color or a subtle pop of interest, and it's going to layer in just a little bit easier than trying to incorporate larger furniture pieces in this way. And if you do take just a little bit more of a minimalistic approach, when you are adding some of those key eclectic furniture items, this is really going to allow each piece to stand out, and it will make this style just be a little bit more of a focal point in the rest of the room. And I won't lie, I am somewhat more of a minimalist when it comes to my home decor, so I do really envy people who can lean into this Zen style and achieve a little bit more of that calming look in their space. And of course, I just think it's so fun when you're adding these little bits of personal touches and personal details. This is where a Zen space can really start to feel like your own home, and you can really feel reflected in that space. I would say the key concept you want to keep in mind when you are working with these 2 styles is restraint. I do find Zen can be just a little bit of a snowball where you start incorporating just such natural elements and such simple elements that you do kind of box yourself into a corner where it feels very challenging to add any little bit of character back into the space. space. And eclectic interiors can have a very similar snowball effect where everything starts to feel really mismatched and everything really feels like a focal point in the space. So I do think when you're pairing these two items together, it does just have a very natural pairing to it. And I do think it just really allows your space to evolve over time. So even if your style taste does change, the foundation feels very calm and serene, and you're just mixing in those subtle pops of your personality. Classic French interiors and Grand Millennial is just a very interesting combination. I've never actually considered these two styles together in a space before, but I do have some ideas on how I think I could make these styles work and even how you could elevate them further in your home. Classic French interiors are very elegant and timeless. I will say, as somebody who lives in Canada and only really has visited France for travel, there is just a feeling of a romance in my mind. These spaces, at least to me, just feel a little bit like they're from a storybook or they're almost like a movie set. But I do recognize that there are people who actually live in Parisian apartments or just homes around Europe that do have this beautiful historical charm. I love that for you, and I will be honest, as I've been going through these inspiration images, I am feeling very jealous. Grand Millennial is a similar traditional style, but I do find it tends to almost poke fun at the maximalist nature of these elements. This happens through the use of the layering colors and patterns, and I do find furniture pieces almost tend to feel like slightly campy in a way, if that makes sense. The term Grand Millennial is actually coined just through millennials like me inheriting their grandparents or their parents' furniture and making it their own. And because of that, I do love the style pairing with the classic French interior because I just find this is going to help elevate and add a level of sophistication to that Grand Millennial style. Pairing these styles together, I just find spaces to feel overall very charming, but I do love that playful nature that Grand Millennial brings to the space. I think this style is done really successfully when you use some of those classic French elements as your larger furniture pieces. This just makes it so fun to add personality and character through some of the smaller elements instead. And I do find overall French interiors tend to be quite neutral, so by mixing in just subtler pops of color and some fun patterns in the space, this can really liven up the room and give it a little bit more of a playful feeling. I think a phrase that best describes this style pairing is classic but unexpected. And personally, I have always been a fan of stylish spaces that you can tell just don't take themselves too seriously. And if you are somebody who decorates your home with classic French pieces, I do feel like when you're out shopping, it forces you to be super intentional about each piece you're bringing into the home so that it can feel like it is on theme, and it can start to feel just a little bit stiff and staged. So by incorporating some of those more Grand Millennial elements, it does allow you to venture out and actually find items that more align with your personality. I will say a challenge that I find with these two styles is because everything is just so detailed, the spaces can start to feel just a little cluttered. So you do want to be mindful when you're bringing in each item that there is room for it in the space, and the things you're bringing in should feel just a little bit more curated. This is going to allow your home to feel just a little bit more intentional and lighter. All right, and our last style pairing is going to be California and Coastal. I will say I do consider California Coastal to be a style in itself, but I do think this commenter is referring to the two very separate styles that I listed in one of my previous videos where I did a deep dive of both styles individually. So I do think there is a combination to be had here that is different than just that very classic coastal Californian home. I love coastal interiors. I just feel like these spaces are so relaxing and and refreshing. And overall, I just love that light and airy feeling that these spaces provide. California interiors have a very similar kind of casual feeling to them, but I do love that there's just a little bit more of a southwestern detail added to these spaces. And typically there's also kind of a nod to mid-century modern as well. And while I would consider both spaces to be quite organic, I do feel that California interiors tend to be a little bit more on the warm side, and coastal interiors tend to be a little bit more on the cool side. Looking at this pairing together in a space, I do feel like that warm California influence is really going to help ground the space, and that coastal influence is going to keep it fresh and bright. This is going to give your home that very effortless and inviting feeling, and between the two styles, as you flow it throughout your home, I do feel like you can play up one style over another in each room, and this is really going to dictate the overall feeling you're trying to achieve as you go through your home. Similarities that you can draw from each style is going to be some of those more natural elements. I think a huge theme between both styles is going to be mixing different materials and different textures. When you're layering these elements in this way, it's going to help your space to feel very authentic and honest, and it's not going to feel as repetitive amongst all of the furniture pieces in the room. And because coastal interiors are somewhat crisp, sometimes I do feel like they can be quite stark in your home. So by adding some of these warm and earthy elements of the California style, it is just going to help balance the space nicely. And as I mentioned, California interiors does have a little bit of a southwestern influence as well as some vintage elements. I think these would be key when it comes to adding personality and character into these spaces. A common mistake that I often find with these styles is when they start to feel just a little too themey. So when you are adding in some of those pops of personality and character, this is when the space is really going to start to feel like your home and less like a showroom. So that's all the style pairings I have for this video. Definitely let me know in the comments what your favorite styles are so I can include them in the next video of this series. I've said it once and I'll say it again, I love making these videos. I just think it's so fun and unique to see the different ways we can style a space according to many different styles that are out there. So if you like this video or just simply enjoyed hanging out here with me, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you in my next video.